Hello and welcome to Australia in Space TV. My name's Chris Cubbage. I'm the editor with My Security Media and Australia in Space magazine. Today we're joined by Associate Professor Christian Wolf, Research School of Astronomy and Astrophysics with the ANU College Science. Christian, thanks for joining us on Australia in Space TV.
Good day.
Now, if our audience is not aware, you've been all over Australian TV for sure. I'm sure you've even done some international media on the back of this announcement. Is the monster black hole devouring one sun every day? But we just, as you said, you've been investigating and researching black holes for some time. So you're probably our preeminent expert on black holes and their behavior. This one is the biggest. Do you reckon it's the biggest you're ever going to find?
So it's the fastest growing one. It's
Right.
probably not the most massive black hole. We know a handful of other black holes of which we believe they have a larger mass, possibly up to double the mass of this one.
Oh.
But that would just be the mass that they have already accumulated through earlier feeding. So feeding done in their past. This one definitely stands out at the top spot by being the one that's the fastest growing. So right now it's eating the most amount of matter every single day.
So size and speed, what are you learning out of what the black holes are, what they actually are, given sort of the nature of the universe and the law of physics? Are they breaking rules left, right, and center? What's their purpose?
Yeah, so that's a good one. That was actually a triple question already. What are black holes? Let me start with this. Black holes, you might actually say they are nothing special to start with. They are a lump of matter. A lump of matter like our sun, my body, a stone in your garden. So they exercise gravitational pull on everything else that's around. To first order, that's it. Now, it only turns into a black hole if you compress that matter so tightly that when you get really close up, and the gravity gets stronger and stronger the closer you go, suddenly at some point the gravity gets so strong that even light cannot escape. And that makes the lump of matter a black hole. Now, in that way, it becomes special, but also especially boring because it doesn't really have many properties anymore. It just has its mass. I know the mass of the sun and that of my body, but I know a lot of other things about the sun or about my body, whereas about a black hole, you're not going to learn much more than this.
So black holes are just continually growing. That's it. I've always imagined them as some sort of gateway through to either another dimension or another part of the universe. There's as a whole, as it sort of indicates, or they are just a collection of mass which will continue to get bigger.
It's just a collection of mass in the first instance, and it's not even necessarily getting bigger. Because if it's not eating, if it's just sitting there like a little massive giant in the darkness, then it's truly a black hole. And it's only when it's feeding and it attracts matter around it into what we call an accretion disk, which is like a giant storm around that black hole that ends up glowing very hot and very bright. So you can see it across, a large part of the universe. Only then you get to see it, and it's not a black hole, but it's a shining object, which we then call a quasar in case it is really powerful enough. And then it's also growing. So there's a direct proportionality actually between how much mass is it taking in and how bright does the disk around it through which that mass is going, how bright is that disk glowing? So we infer the eating rate. We infer from the amount of light that we receive from the black hole. The mass is harder to determine, but take away any of the feeding behavior. For example, in the present day universe around our cosmic neighborhood here, we basically don't see feeding black holes anymore. They are just sleeping giants. Then they are dark, and you can measure their mass if you're lucky, and that's all you will ever find out. Now, with respect to the term hole and where is it leading to, it's a hole from which you should not return, as far as I know, in case you fall in, so better don't. Where it may lead to, I think at this stage that's complete speculation. We don't really have a physical theory of where that might lead to, and that would be a non-standard theory if it led anywhere. So for us, it's just very concentrated matter.
So other than being concentrated matter, what do you think? There's other two things. Come back to the purpose, or is it a sort of a hangover to the way that the universe formed? Are black holes being created all the time? Are they forming even now, sort of in the modern universe? This one you found is 12 billion years old. So this is very early formation of the universe. Yeah, where would that go? Are black holes still being created in sort of a modern universe, or is it a remnant of the old universe?
So certainly black holes are being created, but relatively small ones in comparison. In fact, we know that one way of creating black holes is to let a massive star, by which I mean a star 20, 40, 60 times the mass of our sun, let that one reach the end of its life. It'll run out of fuel to keep up the energy and the pressure and all the shining, and it'll collapse in on itself, and part of its matter will go into what forms a black hole, and part of the matter will be ejected in what's known as a supernova explosion. So that's how you can form fairly smallish black holes, at least in comparison to the new one we are now talking about. And that's a process that's actually continuously ongoing. Wherever massive stars reach the ends of their lives, they will be doing that. Now, the big ones, the origin of the big ones, that is a mystery. Their role is not much of a mystery. Let's look at this monster that we are now discussing. All of these really massive black holes live in a sort of mother galaxy or host galaxy, if you want, which otherwise is made up of billions of stars and of gas that's floating around, ready to be turned into new stars. All the stars in our Milky Way have been formed from gas clouds in the beginning. Now, if you imagine this new black hole with its accretion disk emits so much energy, so much light, it's about 20,000 times as much light as all the stars in our Milky Way galaxy are radiating. So it's a very powerful source of light, energy, and what we call radiation pressure. The light literally pushes on the matter and blows it away. The consequence of this is that when the central black hole in a galaxy is actually feeding and going through a huge feeding frenzy like this one, it has a huge impact on the galaxy around it. It can stop all the star formation because it might blow away all the gas, which needs to be in a quiet, cold, and dark space in order to slowly gravitate into forming new stars. And if you don't leave it alone, but if you hammer on it with monster amounts of light, you change the course of life of that galaxy around it. So the black holes have a huge impact on the evolution of the galaxies they live in. And the black hole we have in this...
It's just a natural phenomenon, other than maybe sort of the vacuum cleaner of space. Do you have a theory in terms of either their natural purpose, other than just being a concentration of mass, just that naturally forms?
It is seemingly something that naturally forms, but there's also a mystery about really how these monsters have been formed. They are so massive that we have difficulty explaining how you get all that mass together in the short amount of time that you have from the Big Bang to the time at which we observe them. You've already mentioned this one, we see 12 billion years back in time. So we see it at a point when the universe was just 1.5 billion years old. That's a short amount of time for such a black hole to grow into 15 or 20 billion solar masses, which is what we estimate it is. And more are we finding, or my colleagues are finding, black holes that are actually remarkably close to the Big Bang with not as much mass as this one, but still way too much mass for the time they are seen at. So there are now first voices suggesting maybe these black holes did not originally start with the collapse of one of the earliest massive stars and then just did a lot of growing to get to where we see them, but maybe they have a totally different origin, which we find hard to contemplate at the moment because our regular body of physics doesn't have a mechanism yet to make these. Maybe they were formed in the Big Bang through a kind of process that we can only speculate about at the moment, but that's a really interesting topic for the future.
Well, I was going to ask, what do you find from a research basis are you learning? Is there new science coming out of this, new physics, in terms of the way you look at physics? Are you learning anything along the way, or is it just simply a discovery process at this stage to see how they behave, how common they are, and where they are?
We do learn steps by steps, but we also lay the foundations to learn other and more things in the future. And I can give you an example each. So one thing that we learn, not necessarily from one single object, but from our work to really construct the demographics of growing black holes out there, is that we get more evidence now for the point that I mentioned a moment ago, that maybe the black holes formed first and later the galaxies around them. Because we had set out to really map out what was the trajectory of the black hole growth. Have they been growing improbably fast, and then we don't know how they do it? We have to find some new physical process for doing that. Or have they been growing modestly fast? It's fast to you and I when we think about a solar mass every day being consumed, but this is not going to happen every single day for the next billions of years. This process gets interrupted. And what we're doing is we're looking at the statistics of the black hole masses at different eras in the universe's history. And what we end up finding is actually a modest amount of growth, in fact. And it's all pointing to, wait a minute, they must have started from very large, very massive seed black holes, but then what made these? So this is part of what we are learning right now. There's a more interesting story to their birth than we have contemplated before, but there's also stuff we can use them for in the future to learn more.
One last question on the black hole. We'll then come to the research that you do. Are they moving? They're obviously, I imagine, too big to be orbiting anything. Do they move or have their own orbits?
They're really mostly orbited by other things because they are the most massive body, single body in their home galaxies. So everything else moves around them. And things have a tendency, when they are particularly massive, they sink to the center of a mass distribution, as in a galaxy.
So they do tend to be
not really moving.
Relatively stationary?
Relatively stationary. In fact, relatively stationary relative to what? If everything else in the galaxy is lighter and moves around it, the whole galaxy might be moving, drifting through space, getting closer to other galaxies. But if you restrict the view to what's happening within the galaxy, then things are moving with respect to the black hole, not the other way around.
Great. Well, look, maybe let's talk about the team behind this. I take it you're the lead investigator. But yeah, how many researchers are involved with ANU? Not the ANU, beg your pardon, the research school, and not so much just how many of your researchers are in with the black hole aspect, and then maybe this particular project itself.
So we had 8 people as authors on this paper, and they are pretty much the 8 people who keep working on this project of our research group, on the demographics and the behavior of the fast-growing black hole. They're not all at ANU. Some are at ANU, including some PhD students who are involved. Then there are collaborators from Melbourne University. We have one good friend and collaborator over at the Sorbonne in Paris, and one person in Chile at the European Southern Observatory. So that's a collaboration. And we typically in science have often really international collaborations. And that's just because there isn't that many of us in astronomy. It's a rather specialized field. And often you come across a problem you can't solve yourself. And so you just say, hang on, I know someone from Arizona. We have to bring him onto the team now. He doesn't even know what we're doing, but we need this person to now solve the problem really, so that we trust the outcome. This sort of thing will happen very often. At the Research School of Astronomy and Astrophysics, we have a handful of more people who are interested in black holes. And then we have lots more people who are working on the evolution of the whole galaxies, which is impacted by the black holes, but they're not working on the black holes per se. And we have a big research group that's working on one particular galaxy, our own Milky Way, and is trying to understand its own history of evolution over the last 12, 13, possibly 13.5 billion years, trying to find, for example, the oldest stars in the sky that are members of our Milky Way galaxy, and looking at what chemistry they have and what we can learn about that for the evolution of the Milky Way overall.
Well, this one, you first detected it using a 2.3 meter telescope in the Coonabarabran in New South Wales. Was it just a matter of picking up the phone to the ESO and say to Chile and saying, "Can you mind getting some extra images of this?" Because that's one of the world's largest telescopes. So it sounds like you went from a very small one to the world's largest one. How easy was that process?
It turned out to be easy in the end, although it's normally not designed to be easy. So in order to get access to these frontier facilities, and the European Southern Observatory at Paranal in Chile is arguably the world's most advanced observatory. If you look at all the instrumentation they have assembled there. So you use it for the cutting edge work. The way this normally works is that twice a year, there is basically a call for proposals. So we write long documents and technical descriptions exactly of what we want to do. And then it gets reviewed. And in the end, the top 20% suggestions are being adopted because more would not fit into the schedule. And you come back next year if you haven't been chosen and try again. That's how that normally works. But there's always a tiny slice of time at these, even the largest facilities, even the Hubble Space Telescope and so on, reserved for the director of the observatory and special work they decide that they want to see carried out without having to ask anyone else's permission. And what we did in this case, and it wasn't simply for a few more images, it was really for a high definition spectroscopy in the infrared that would reveal the black hole mass and many other details. We actually approached the director and said, look, we've got this object here. We've got this spectrum from Coonabarabran. We can tell you what it is. Can we have a little bit of time urgently to put the whole story together? And we were told, yes, you can. And that way it was actually remarkably easy, but normally it's not.
And I think the outcome from that is that puts ANU, this is obviously a phone call from Canberra to the ESO in Chile, or is it via European Space Agency? What does that process actually involve? Is it a phone call?
So it's not a phone call. It's actually, you do still write up a document, but it's a little bit of a shorter one. And you submit it through a web form, and it first gets screened, and then serious suggestions get literally put onto the director's desk, like for your consideration here. And then you hear from them in an email. So
it was just one of those things. Looking at the ESO website, it's an amazing piece of infrastructure. So again, I just wanted to make sure it wasn't as easy as just a quick phone call. Can you turn that telescope around and point in this particular direction? Maybe talk us through. Yeah, I'd hope not.
Yeah.
Maybe talk us through the School of Astronomy and Astrophysics. You'll obviously continue this particular project on black holes. What range of science are you doing within the research school?
A broad range. So it's black holes and their growth. It's the galaxies and their evolution over most of the cosmic history, from observations we can only do with the James Webb Space Telescope in the earliest stages of the universe, all the way to the Milky Way galaxy that we see pretty much in a present day state. There is research on star formation, on turbulence in the universe. There are big computer simulations being done of synthetic universes that we build and see how they evolve under certain conditions, to try and match that to observations and see, now it matches. Now I understand what's going on out there. We have a big instrumentation group. We have what we call the AITC, the Advanced Instrumentation and Technology Center, that is building new instruments, including instruments that will go onto ESO telescopes in Chile. We do space testing of satellites. Before they're being shot into orbit, you need to expose them to vacuum, to hard radiation. You need to rattle on them to simulate the rocket launch. All of these tests you need to do on the ground before, to make sure the thing isn't breaking 3 seconds into the mission. So there's a broad variety of activity going on, research activity, engineering activity, and a lot of it is just sort of trying out new things for which there isn't quite a need yet, but if it worked, you could vaguely see the need coming up.
And I suppose one final thing, we're in February 2024. Anything in particular that the audience might want to keep an eye out for later this year? Is it as this one was, just happened to find it and jump on it? Do you have any sort of events that you'd like to bring attention to for later in the year?
Absolutely, and not so much a scientific event, but a commemoration, because Mount Stromlo Observatory, which is where the Research School of Astronomy and Astrophysics is located, is going to celebrate its 100th birthday this year.
Wow.
And also the AAT, at Siding Spring Observatory. The AAT used to be the Anglo-Australian Telescope, and now it's the Australian Astronomical Telescope, when the Anglo folks departed because they ran out of cash. That's going to celebrate its 50th birthday later this year. So there's lots of events being held at Siding Spring Observatory, to which the public is invited, and events held in Canberra and at Mount Stromlo, to which the public will be invited.
Well, look, we'll get the links off you. I imagine otherwise it's anu.edu.au to make a start. But Associate Professor Christian Wolf, Research School of Astronomy and Astrophysics at ANU College of Science, thank you so much today for that insights. Astrophysics is not my area of expertise, as you might have just known, but nothing like finding the fastest black hole in the universe. So congratulations to you and the team.
Thank you.
Look forward to speaking to you again.
See you soon.